All right, guys. We're live.
We're live.
Okay, so
Yay!
what's up, guys? This is Erin's Comic Room, issue 3, the reboot. Okay, this is our third episode on YouTube here, and we have a special guest today, David Pepose. Is that how you say your name?
Yeah, David Pepose, right here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the show. I'm excited to chat because, yes, as I understand, am I the first creator interview you've
Yes,
done?
you're the
Yes,
first
our very
creator,
first one.
I'm excited. You guys are setting the bar really low, so this is it's only uphill from here. But no, thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be here, and yeah, excited to talk comics and anything under the sun with you.
Cool. So usually we go over just like usually we ask our guests like just how your week's been going and like
Sure.
what you've been reading. In your case, what you've been working on, maybe what you've been writing on. Just
Sure.
what, like a rundown of like an average week with David Pepose.
Oh boy, for me, I think the thing I love about comics is going to be the thing that makes this a terrible answer, which is no 2 weeks ever seem to be the same, at least for me. Yeah, I've been working on. Let's see, boy. Well, so my new book, Scout's Honor, the third issue is coming next week, so we're kind of getting the publicity machine going for that. Beyond that, I'm working on another outline of a new series. Where fingers crossed that's gonna come together. That the outline has certainly been kind of kicking my butt the last couple of weeks. Beyond that, I guess I can talk about this. I got greenlit for an anthology story in the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell anthology.
Ooh.
It'll be the third and final
That's
volume.
awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
So I'll be working with my longtime collaborator, Mon House. He's done variant covers for every series I've ever worked on. So we'll be doing a short story that's kind of some fun genre remixing that a lot of people probably know me for, but this time with a Lovecraft spin. So that's kind of fun. And beyond that, just got a contract in for another short project, my first work for hire gig. Actually, it'll be interesting. It'll be really fun. I can say it's not like a Marvel or DC gig. It's not like it's not for like a comics thing that most people will know about. But it's fun. I get to work with some friends of mine, and beyond that, just kind of getting the gears turning on a bunch of different projects. I have a lot of scripts that have been kind of sitting, just waiting for art to come in. And so we've got little bits and pieces of art starting to trickle in, and that's very fun and very exciting. And then
that's really cool. When you get art back,
yes,
that's got to be. I mean, I've gotten like characters from like friends that they've drawn for me and stuff, and it was like the most exhilarating thing in the world. So like, it must be amazing when you get like your entire book and just be like, wow.
It's a combination of excitement, and you're a little excited and you're a little scared and you don't quite know what the ratio is. It's when the art is clicking, and I've been really fortunate to work with artists that get the work. It's like nothing else. And I've just, getting lots of little pieces in, getting different covers in, getting character designs, getting like preliminary layouts. It's really cool. And as a writer who can be kind of lazy, getting that artwork it's like getting dessert first. And so you're kind of like, all right, like, oh, this art looks really good. I guess I better finish this book up.
I really enjoy Scout's Honor's artwork. I cannot say the artist's name. Luca
Casalanguida, I believe is how you pronounce his name.
Okay, he's done a fantastic job with Scout's Honor.
He's so amazing. It's funny. I'd actually reached out to Luca years ago about another project, and he was busy working on a small independent title called James Bond. And so I was so thrilled when my editors, Christina Harrington and Mike Martz, mentioned that Luca was available and looking for his next project. And I was like, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Luca's work. Let's get him on board. And he just really, he's knocked the whole thing out. I can't wait for people to get to see. He really, issues 1 and 2 are fantastic, but he really gets to kind of dig deep into the post-apocalyptic landscape in issue 3. It's a densely plotted issue, and so there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. And
that cover for issue 3 is pretty good. I want to see if I can pull that up there.
Yeah, Andy Clark and Jose Villarrubia, real dream team. I'm so thrilled. I was not told they were going to be working on covers, and I just kind of saw the first one, and I was just like, what? Huge fans of both of them. Jose in particular has been really generous and kind to me for a long time, and so getting to actually get to work with him, it's a real thrill.
That's a really cool cover.
Yeah,
this one might be wall worthy.
I'm so thrilled with this one. You get to see our Suicide Hornets. Yes, it's certainly a
getting
timely
some Ghostbusters feels here too.
Yes, I'll say is the packs. There's a reason why they have to wear those packs, and the trials of the Eagle are going to be quite challenging for Kit and Dez and the rest of the Ranger Scouts. And that's what happens when you're in a survivalist cult. Is they want you to be prepared for anything, and boy, anything is quite a spectrum to work within. So this is a really fun issue.
After issue 2, a lot of big things happen in issue 2. I was left like I believe I messaged Jose because we've been hyping up Scout's Honor for it's such a unique book. Like,
thank you.
And I'm so drawn to anything post-apocalyptic. Like it's just kind of my like go-to genre, and I'm kind of drawn to it. And usually all these books kind of blend together, but this one is like really standing out and is really unique in the sense of the character and the story that you're trying to tell with the character. I really, Kit, sorry, I almost said Dez. Yeah. Dez is,
I love them both.
Kit's friend. I love them both. Yes. And I love what's happening with them in the story. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but I'm really excited to see what happens between those two.
It's funny because the way this book came together is it's very different than any other books that I've done before. Usually it's you're kind of putting all your eggs into one basket. You come up with your concept, you bring together your art team, you come up with some pitch pages, and then you kind of shop it around. And it's thumbs up or thumbs down. Aftershock is unique. I think there are only a handful of other publishers that work this way, in that they really want to be hands-on with the development of the book. So it was, I've known a lot of people at Aftershock for a long time. My editor, Mike Martz, I interned for him at DC Comics when I was out of college. And so I've been pitching them for years and just being like, come on guys, like I'm getting more work out. Like, let's find something. And I had sent them a number of concepts saying, do you like any of these? Do any of these kind of stand out to you? Because I'd be happy to develop it into something further. And, Scout's Honor had been the most recent concept I had added to the mix. I had stuff that I had been developing for months and months and months. And then Scout's Honor, I was like, well, I came up with that idea last week. And of course, that was the idea that Aftershock went for. And I give them a lot of credit. I think they realized how prescient this book was before I did. I pitched this in 2019. But the way that, the development process came about and the way that the paperwork came in, I signed my contract is actually, I think it was about a year ago. I think it was about a year ago today. So that was a little crazy, going into the pandemic, going into a world that looked very post-apocalyptic.
Last year, this time, like all the publications were like on hold too. Like that must have been like a scary time going into this.
It's very scary. I had gone home to my hometown for a funeral, not COVID related. And I remember I signed my paperwork, flew back, and then everything shut down that next week. So in a lot of ways, I was a little anxious writing this book, because it just both the state of the world, and you want to make sure that you're doing right by your readers, and just despite everything going on. And I realized that having written this book, it made me remember that I believe in happy endings as a writer. A lot of people, if you've read my work, it usually starts in kind of a bleak place, and then it kind of works its way up and out.
I'm seeing that as we're to So I'll be honest with you, and I'm sorry. I'm gonna let Jose talk here and get into the questionnaire of everything here in a couple minutes. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't know who you were before Scout's Honor.
Sure.
I read the preview. I believe it was in the back of some. I'm a really big Aftershock fan, and going into I'm new to indie books, and going into indie books, I've been picking up a lot of Aftershock books, and I happened to read your preview.
Well, thank you.
And I was like, oh my God, this is like, it was one of those books where, it must have on my pull list,
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I certainly felt that pressure going in. Aftershock is the biggest publisher I've worked for to date. My books previously, I had 3 series set through Action Lab Entertainment. And then I ran a Kickstarter for my book, The OZ, last fall. But I knew kind of going in, all right, this is the biggest platform I've worked with. I've known Mike for over a decade. And so there's sort of that feeling of like, I can't let this guy down. This is sort of my big break in this case. And yeah, it's in certain ways, it's sort of staying the course from the way that I've usually done my work. But on the other hand, working with Aftershock, it was definitely a learning curve. This is the first time I've worked with real editors, working for a place like Action Lab, who I love. They were a fantastic place to kind of get my start in the industry. They're kind of short-staffed. They don't have the bandwidth to edit me. And so working with actual editors and kind of having my book, having my team match made for me, it's sort of working without a net in a lot of ways. And you have to kind of trust in your voice as a writer, and trust in your team, and trust in your editors to kind of keep everybody on the guardrails. But as a control freak, it was certainly a challenge for me to learn to let go. But I think it's made me kind of a more nimble writer as a result.
Okay, so this will be the perfect segue into the first question that we wanted to ask you. And I'll let Jose ask, because you've been kind of quiet, Jose, and I want you to get your time.
Oh, no worries. I just didn't want to interrupt anyone.
No, you're all right. This has been fun.
Yeah. But what are some of the influences you had on your writing? You were talking about how like the are giving you, a challenge to to improve yourself as a writer. What?
Boy, well, some of it depends.
I mean, like what other? Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I was going to say some of it depends on project to project. Like I'm always bringing in certain influences for different projects. For Scout's Honor, I was thinking of things ranging from Mad Max Fury Road to the Fallout series to a show called The Path that was on Hulu.
I was actually going to ask you about your influence for this, and I was going to ask you if Fallout, Mad Max, and
huge Fallout fan.
Yes.
It's my favorite video game. It's a game that I actually can't play anymore because I would not get any work done if I kept playing that game. It's very addictive. Things like the Hunger Games, things like the Handmaid's Tale, that all kind of went in the cauldron for Scout's Honor, as well as trying to find like whatever's kind of autobiographical about, in a series. I tend to kind of go towards the psychology of it all. I tend to go for the psychology of trauma. That's something that's always kind of interested me as a storyteller. For Scout's Honor in particular, it was autobiographical in my upbringing. I wasn't raised in a cult. I should be very clear about that.
Okay.
But I
were you a scout?
My younger brothers were, and so watching them as the outside in, for them it was very positive. It was all about learning practical skills and hanging out with your boys and the camaraderie of it all, and the tradition of it all. And meanwhile, on the outside, you see like the costumes and the bylaws and the pageantry, and you don't have to squint too hard to make it look like a cult.
Yeah.
But for me, I grew up.
Was actually.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I actually was in the Scouts.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Eagle.
It's one of those things that it's like you can see exactly why people like. I mean, just like you're saying, when you became an Eagle Scout, what, you were 17, 18, and it's still like a part 17, of, it's a part of your identity. And there are, it's funny, any friends that I've had who have finished their Scout training or have made it to Eagle, like that becomes like a real big part of who they are. And that's sort of, that's religion. That's in a nutshell is, it becomes like a part of your identity. It becomes a part of your culture. I grew up in a pretty conservative, both politically and religiously household. I grew up in a Jewish household in Missouri. And it wasn't until I left home that I realized that a lot of things that I was raised to believe either were kind of distorted or they weren't quite as set in stone as I had believed. It would have probably told me that I was a classical liberal or a small D Democrat, and then kind of realizing like, no, like I'm an actual Democrat, and it was really disorienting. It was the first time I had left home and kind of having to recalibrate, saying like, these are my values. My values aren't changing, but kind of figuring out, well, no, that's actually putting me in a very different trajectory than I had been raised to believe. That's really the heart of Scouts Honor in a big way, is kind of, that's the coming of age of it all, is finding out that like, there are things that you were told growing up that aren't necessarily as rooted in reality as you might expect. And it doesn't take much to really kind of knock your whole worldview off its axis. And you kind of have to figure out after that, like, all right, what are the parts that I want to keep? And what are the parts that I have to do away with? And how do I kind of fill that void? And I think that's really, that's what Scouts Honor is about. When you kind of sort of strip away the post-apocalyptic side of it, it's really about people growing up in a small, isolated, conservative town. And what happens when you don't fit the mold? How do you kind of navigate that? How do you live your life? And how do you go for, to live your most authentic self? And that's something that a lot of people, I think that it's a lifelong journey for some people. And I think that's really kind of the human heart that kind of keeps this story beating.
That's that hits home for me.
Sure.
That really hits home for me. Being a trans woman and
Sure.
being, I grew up in a we were Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We were like the crazy religious people that you see on TV,
Yep.
in the South, in some secluded town. Yep. That was where I grew up in.
And the thing that I found most interesting writing about this book, because for me growing up, my Jewish identity, it is an important part of me. Although I would say that my spiritual journey is very different than that of my parents, which was very different than that of their parents. The thing I like most about being a Jew is it's a religion that's kind of built on like literary criticism and literary analysis. It's like 5 different rabbis having 10 different takes on the same passage. And then we keep all that apocryphal material in the margins. It's very much, it's a wide spectrum of belief. And the thing that I find so interesting about Scouts Honor is it's both about the perversion of religion, but it's also like, how can spirituality inform the way you live your life, and how can that help you in kind of the most dire moments of your life? It's one of those things. There are some people who, religion is the thing that can get them across the finish line when they've got nothing else left in the tank. But you don't have to look more than your local Fox News affiliate to know that there's a lot of terrible stuff that gets done in the name of religion too. And so that's a lot of Kit's story. A lot of or things like the Catholic priest scandals. My partner was raised Catholic, and she's not a member of the church anymore, and that was a big reason why. There's sort of that feeling of disillusionment. And sort of saying, like, how can I stay a part of an organization that has swept these kinds of things under the rug? And you kind of put those stories together, and that's Kit's trajectory in a big way. She's raised as a true believer in the Ranger Scout tradition. And suddenly all these values that she believes in, all the positive things that she sees as the Ranger Scouts being the difference between civilization and oblivion. And suddenly she's like, oh, there's rot underneath all this. And how do you reconcile that? There's no easy answers to it. And it's not a one size fits all kind of journey. It's something that you really kind of have to barrel forward and keep moving forward and see where you wind up from there.
That's
that's hitting hard for me too, because like I grew up in a very strict Catholic home, and I'm pagan now. So that should tell you how that went. But but there are times where like with like my parents, or like with at least now with my mother, I would have discussions about mainly a lot of the crap that the church has gone through. Excuse my language.
Sure.
And like one of the hardest things is as to like justify
Mm-hmm.
their beliefs and what they and how they go about it. And do you, just kind of like, I'm not going off script here, Aaron, but just to kind of bring
Sure.
it back to Scout's Honor, how much of a challenge will that provide Kit? Because she's now Kit's now discovering that there's, like you said, rot underneath the surface.
Right. It's
Once
you know, Kit, we'll see a lot of it in we'll see some of it kind of starting to creep up in issue 3. Issue 4, we will really focus on that a lot. Because what does it mean to be a believer? You know, and you sort of you hear things like hate the sin, love the sinner. That's going to be something that Kit's going to have to kind of figure out. Is like, well, what of this Ranger Scout tradition is any of it worth keeping? You know, or is it just, you know, and what needs to be kind of burned away? And so, yeah, it's that's going to be really kind of the heart and soul of this book in a lot of ways. And we'll kind of see that triangulated a bit through her friend Des as well. You know, this is kind of a light spoiler as far as the book is concerned. We showed this in issue 2, but Des is the son of the Scoutmaster, who's kind of the religious and political leader of this cult. And we find out he's gay. And, you know, that I thought, you know, how difficult would it be for a woman to navigate this like very kind of misogynist, patriarchal society? And then what happens to a member of the LGBTQ community? You know, it's sort of these very rigid gender roles and these very rigid roles of sort of, you know, what sexuality is supposed to be. What happens when your dad's the pastor and you don't fit that mold? You know, I compare Des. I always call him sort of the Loki to Kit's Thor, but in a lot of ways, he really kind of steals the show for me. I think every time that he's on the page, I always feel a little sad, you know, because for him, living an authentic life feels like walking on the moon. You know, it feels so impossible for him, and you know, and so he kind of has to live in the shadows in a lot of ways, and who he is and what his society's expectations of him are, they're going to kind of come to a head in a big way. And seeing the fallout of that it's one of, I think, kind of the more heartfelt moments of the book.
I like how you just explained Des, and there's a moment here that we have that I like to pull up. It's not really spoiling anything, but it's classic Des, always playing for sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of what you were explaining, you know, being the pastor's son and everything. Like,
he's always second best to Kit, and I think that's something that, like, their friendship is already kind of on some uneasy ground in the first issue, and we'll see. You know, there's a big misunderstanding in issue 2, where
I'd say,
you know, Des has a secret and Kit has a secret, and that's the heartbreaking thing of their friendship. Is despite them being their closest friends on the planet, there's something major about each of them that they can't tell the other one. And that kind of puts them, it goes from a friendly rivalry to something that's a little more hostile, a little more bitter. And, you know, their friendship is certainly going to splinter before it can come back together.
So okay, Jose, you can go. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, like, that's like what I liked about that is that it's actually one of the most dangerous aspects of the whole story. You have this post-apocalyptic world.
Sure.
There's giant hornets, you know, attacking. You know, there's, you know, they're living in a cult. But the dangerous thing is that, like, if everyone found out who their true selves were, it'll be hell. But like, if Des ever found out who Kit was, Kit loses a friend.
There's a lot of masks being worn,
and there's the question of loneliness, in which Kit has already felt lonely just keeping the secret between herself and her dad.
Yeah, I that's the thing that I like most about Kit as a character. I think that's sort of, you know, like I said, I'm always trying to kind of find the elements of like what's sad about a character. I feel like that's always very compelling. I always say, how do I make an audience cry? And then I kind of think afterwards, like, is there a way I can make them laugh in the middle of it? But yeah, it's just that, like, you know, you have to kind of, Kit has to live her life with like a guard up all the time. there's only one person on the planet that she can be even remotely herself around, her father. Her father's the only one who knows her secret. And that's like, that's a hell of a way to live your life. And then the fact that that Kit, despite she should be laying low, winds up excelling. She really is the best and the brightest that the Ranger Scouts have to offer, except for the fact that her very existence is kind of a blasphemy to them, if they ever knew. I mean, it's not even, as we'll see kind of as the series progresses, it's not even so much being ostracized socially that's a big danger for Kit, but a blasphemy of that level, it could really be lethal in a lot of ways. And so Kit really is kind of walking on thin ice every time she puts on her Ranger Scout badges.
So I have a question.
Shoot.
So what, without any spoilers, because we're only 2 issues in, so this right now, this story with an explosive second issue. I mean, I'm still kind of reeling from that. This story could go anywhere, but I'm just kind of curious what you think, without any spoilers, what would happen to Kit if she were found out by the Ranger Scouts?
You'll find out soon.
Okay. That's all then. That's all I need to know then.
Stay tuned.
Okay.
Cool. Yes. It's one of those things. It's a little like Chekhov's gun. So I don't think it's like spoiling too much. That which comes up has to come down. And no secret can really be hidden forever. Yes. And so Kit is gonna, yes, Kit's luck will run out pretty soon.
Everything's going to come to a head, right?
Everything's going to come to a head. And that's I think a big theme of Scouts Honor in general is that, secrets can be really oppressive, but then when you kind of rip the veil off, that is almost like a form of violence in and of itself. The truth can be blinding.
It's kind of how life is. Everything's just kind of normal until it's not,
Yes. That's a great way.
It's not, and then everything's changed, and you just kind of have to, where you've already learned everything, and you've been in a comfortable place, and then you when everything changes, you have to relearn everything. You have to relearn your comfort zone. I understand that 100%.
That's exactly. I mean, you nailed it. It's sort of these toxic secrets. And how just revealing the truth, it's still there's pain to that, there's discomfort to that, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily mean it shouldn't happen.
So I'm thinking that Kit has immense potential for to be a force of good in this. I'm gonna refer to it as a wasteland, because I too am a Fallout fan, and I'm gonna be honest with you. As soon as I opened this book, that's what I thought of. I was just this is a story.
Huge Fallout fan.
That is set in the Fallout universe almost. You know what I mean?
I would take it. Let me put it this way. The reason I said it in Colorado was I looked through all the Fallout games, and I was like, all right, what's a location that Fallout hasn't already colonized, so I can sort of carve out my little niche.
That's really cool.
But I mean, I think you're nailing it. I mean, I've said that Kit is kind of like a post-apocalyptic Joan of Arc, and this is sort of her journey into her long dark night of the spiritual soul. What comes out on the other side of that, you'll have to read to find out.
Now, guys, we need to lobby. We need to show Bethesda this story and have you write a couple side quests in there.
Please, I'll anytime.
Game.
Oh man,
I think you're killing it. I think you're killing it. I think you would in that Fallout universe. I think you would be amazing at some side story, maybe even a main story. But I'm not going to say anything. Bethesda's main stories are always weak, so
call your congressman. Call Bethesda. I will gladly join the Minutemen. Fight off the Brotherhood of Steel.
So way off topic. What's your favorite Fallout game of all of them?
4. 4 is my favorite. I don't get me wrong. I really enjoy 3. Surprisingly, and maybe it's because I just wasn't in the mood for it and I didn't give it a real shot. I didn't get into New Vegas as much. But for me, part of it's like graphical. Like I just love like the most state of the art graphics. So 4 is always going to kind of grab me.
You like the good aesthetic, everything.
Yeah.
Like.
And I like the building mechanic of it all, particularly with the power armor. Being able to customize your own power armor. If there's one thing that I regret about Scout's Honor, is there was no real good way to kind of fold in like power armor into the mix, because I love that stuff so much. But yeah, I huge fan of Fallout 4, and like I said, to the point where like I'm not allowed to play it anymore because I won't get any work done. That's
me. I don't play video games at all anymore because of that.
Yeah, there were several weeks of work that have been lost to Fallout 4, so I just can't. I can't play it anymore. But I love it. And if they ever did, like, if Dark Horse did a licensed comic with them, I feel like they're like the most likely suspect. And they didn't call me, I'd be really hurt. Yes, if anybody's watching and they want to do a Fallout comic, please call me. I will have so much fun with that. I will write a story that you will love, and it'll be super fun for everyone.
I would definitely buy that. I'm probably going to buy everything.
Buy that
now. Like you're probably going to
buy that and campaign for it.
Yeah. I honestly, I might start tweeting at Bethesda after this.
Do it. Tag me in it. I would love to do it. I'll show them this book.
I have a pretty big Twitter fan base, so maybe they'll see it.
Let's do it.
I don't know. Like Todd, look here. No, I don't even know if Todd's in charge of all that, but yeah. I'm a huge, like I said, I'm usually drawn to post-apocalyptic stories, and it's just it's just an ever sinking like feeling in the back of my head ever since I was young, and I don't know if you guys can like relate to this, but ever since I was like little, I've had it's not like every night, but maybe like once a month, once every 2 months, I have a dream, the same dream of like the nukes going off.
I mean, I can certainly say, at least for me, the last 4 years, my work has gotten decidedly a little more apocalyptic. I most of my books have come out in the previous administration, and I remember that night kind of feeling like, oh boy, this could be it. Like this is sort of where like all the pillars of like civilization, they could topple. But the thing that I like about post-apocalyptic stuff as a genre is it's ultimately, aesthetically it's really cool, but it's ultimately like a story about hope. It's kind of like how do we move forward even when like society is kind of mangled. And there are interesting angles of how we survive, but it's ultimately like, how do we build a better world? How do we get ourselves out of the mess that we're in? And like I was saying earlier, Scout's Honor, it really reminded me that I do believe in happy endings, that we can turn a corner. And I feel like by the time I finished writing this, we were kind of in the thick of things. And by the time that the final art came in, we were starting to turn a corner. And I think by the time that this book comes out, hopefully we'll have all kind of.
I can't wait. I can't wait. And I'm looking at issue 4's cover right now, and like you said, like the post-apocalyptic world, like we can. I mean, I've wrote stories set in a post-apocalyptic world. I'm somewhat of a writer, but like it's really fun because you can do things like giant spiders, Yep. Like that's crazy. Spiders. Like yes, like that looks really. This cover might be wall worthy. I might have like a little Scout's Honor like
please that's
place in my apartment because these covers are nice. Like it really tells you what is inside the book, and I think that's a thing that's lacking in comics today, especially if you go like the big two. I have somebody that comes with me to comic book store every now and then, and they're not into comics, so like, and they've told me like. Well, I've opened up the book, but there's like nothing that's on the cover. You know what I mean? Right. And like the cover has nothing to do with like what's inside the book. And that was like a big draw, especially like back in the day, you would walk into a comic book store.
Sure.
And when I was a kid, it wasn't about like, what's cool, whatnot. It was all about what was on the cover. Okay.
Right.
Oh yeah.
It was all about what was on the cover. And I think you're encapsulating a lot of that. These are some Amazing covers. I love them.
And Andy Clark and did a really amazing job with all of these covers. I mean, I have found that when I've sort of served as my own editor, coming up with cover designs is one of the hardest parts of the job, because you want to find something that like sells the story and sort of illustrates what's going on in the pages, but it also looks unique design wise. And Andy just did such a fantastic job. And Jose Villarrubia, he's really a legendary colorist, and he's served as an editor on the book Infidel over at Image. He knows how to kind of run a comic. And so he's just imbued all of these images with such drama, and such a wonderful sense of mood. What's funny is, I'll give a little bit of behind the scenes on the cover you have up right now, is that originally I'm pretty sure that had been a cover idea for issue 2. And I had said, wait, he had shown us this cover and the version that wound up being issue 2. And I said, hey, I really like this cover. Let's save it for the last issue. And so, yeah, it's a really, I love this cover a lot.
It's probably my favorite out of all of them.
It's my
to be
favorite.
Honest. It really encapsulates Kit,
Yeah, it's just, and it's one of those things, like, don't get me wrong, it looked really good in black and white, but I only saw the color version of this a couple of weeks ago, and I was just so blown away.
I would be over the moon at this.
I've told Jose, I'm like, look, man, like, whenever you want to work on my stuff, like you only have to let me know, because he is just, I'm a huge believer in good art makes or breaks a comic, but good colors will make or break your art. Yeah. And so, Jose, I'm very picky with colors, and I don't have to be picky with Jose. He knows exactly what looks best, way better than I would. And so he and Andy, they're just a dream team. And I really hope that I get to work with them again on another series soon.
I really like Kit, especially I like Kit's design, because like Kit, and I was gonna ask you, like, and then you kind of just started referring to Kit as she, and I was gonna kind of ask you, like, what would be like the proper pronouns for Kit, because that's the one thing with the design. She's got a very androgynous design. Like some features of her are really feminine, and some features of her are masculine, and it's just
by design.
Yeah.
That was something that Luca and I talked about at the beginning, was sort of this idea of, like, you have to be kind of undercover in your own society. Like and so the idea of the Ranger Scouts being so driven by toxic masculinity, and then finding a woman who can sort of quote unquote pass in this society. The idea of saying, like, having an androgynous figure leading this book was very important to me. And it's funny, you're not the first person to ask me about Kit's pronouns. And it's one of those things, as the book started coming together, I was acutely aware that, like, there were going to be parallels to the trans experience. There were going to be parallels to the gay and lesbian experience. And for me, I always try to write with some degree of wiggle room, some degree of saying, like, I never want to invalidate a reader's experience with this book, because if a reader reads this and finds something important, that's way more important than, like, what's my personal headcanon as the writer. Like, I'm very pro death of the author in that regard. What I've always said is that, I feel like, we use she and her as Kit's pronouns in the book, but I think a lot of that is because, given sort of the dark ages that they're living in, and the society that Kit has been raised, I don't think she would necessarily have the vocabulary to have a deeper conversation on that. I think for Kit, in that regard, her gender identity, she's sort of off the beaten path in terms of how she was raised and what her society is telling her.
It's very interesting, actually. I cannot wait to see what happens between these two main characters. From the first issue, I was like, like as soon as I saw these characters together, I'm like, are they gonna
Yeah.
like that was my question. Like my instant, like, and it's just really exciting. I can't wait for Wednesday,
It's Kit. I will say Kit and Des. Well, I'll just say that their friendship is gonna hit a freezing point on Wednesday. Things will not go well as they are both competing in the Trials of the Eagle, which are sort of like the master scout level, and only one new member can be accepted per troop. And so Kit and Des, it's sort of this question of, Kit is trying to figure out like what's the truth behind the Ranger Scouts. So she has a reason to try to infiltrate the Eagle's Guard. She needs their technology to find out if this message from the past is real. And Des, meanwhile, this has been his goal, his dream, his entire life, and his father's been pushing him to do this ever since he was a kid. His father was part of the Eagles Guard before he became the cult leader, and so they talk about the unity of opposites. It's sort of the unstoppable force and the immovable object. They're going to kind of clash in a big way, but they both have their reasons for being there, and that's going to make them kind of fight to the death. Not necessarily to the death, but close to it. And
I like that quote, when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. I really like that quote. And you just okay. So I recently, like, I know it's an old movie, but I just saw The Dark Knight like a week ago. Or no, wait, like a week ago. So like that was one of the Heath Ledger quotes.
Yes,
and I feel that like it's a really good relationship, and it's as much as I want to see these two characters happy and together, or like maybe not together, I just want to see them happy and maybe just doing their own things and not having their lives completely like uprooted and chaos and stuff. I want to see these characters have a happy ending, but I also want to see them struggle just a little bit more. Before that happens.
You're gonna really like issue 5.
That's I can't wait. Wednesday. Usually when I go to a comic book store, there's one book that draws me to the store to like go pick up my pull, and Scout's Honor has been one of those books, and honestly, it's been coming out, at least for me. I've only getting like 1 or 2 other books with it on the weeks that it's coming out, so it's just been like something that I just can really enjoy.
Thank you. It's I every time I write a book, the first question is like, how do I make somebody care? Like, just because there's a lot of books out there, and so like the art of making a stranger give a damn is like, I think, like a prerequisite. And for me, it's always kind of figuring out like what's sympathetic about a character.
It's a very unique, like, I don't know, if it was like say there was no Kit and it was just like some dude bro,
right?
Like, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's the characters that kind of make the book.
It's funny because when I pitched this to Aftershock initially, it was just like a quick kind of log line. And so the idea of Kit being a woman was never actually in the initial pitch that I had sent. It wasn't until I kind of developed the outline that I came up with that. And it was because I'd sent Aftershock, it's probably a dozen different concepts, and they picked Scout's Honor. And my first thought was, oh, awesome. And then the second thought was, oh crap, it's 2019. How am there's no way I can get away with a book that's all dudes. It's just not going to happen. And then I realized, like, lean into that. Like, that is weird. Like, and so I was like, yeah, what happens if there's a woman trying to navigate this? And like, how, and that she doesn't know it's weird, that she's just been raised that it's like totally cool. And I was like, oh, that's something. That's like an emotional core to it. And I think between Kit's struggles and Dez's struggles, that kind of, I think, lends a nice human element. And then you can sort of build on the kind of outlandish Boy Scout post-apocalyptic imagery on top of that, as long as you've got these kind of 2 parallel tracks running to really kind of keep the human heart going.
So I wanted to ask you, is there any future plans for Scouts Honor, like beyond these 5 issues?
Not currently, but I mean, look, never say never. I'm a big believer in that. Like, I never want to overstay my welcome with a book. I'm working on the 3rd and final volume of my breakout series, Spencer and Locke, right now, and I can tell you, like, sequels are really, really hard. So I wouldn't want to do it unless I had like a really good idea for it, and if the demand was there. If Aftershock wanted it, I'd certainly be open to discussing it.
Oh, I'll definitely tweet at them.
But
they follow me too, so like,
yeah.
I'd be like, hey, I'm gonna cancel you if you don't do it.
It's no plans currently, but never say never. I always write a book with another idea in my back pocket. But yeah, it's we'll see. I mean, I definitely wrote this to be complete and self-contained. And so Kit and Dez's story will have like a nice solid bit of punctuation at the end. But there's always more room for them to grow.
Honestly, as more of a reader and like a reviewer type of person for comic books, I feel like that's the thing that sets like Aftershock apart from like the big 2 or like these other indie studios like Mad Cave and like Boom, and they have like a 5-issue contained series. Like Scouts Honor, you got 5 issues, you're going to tell a story and the story's going to have a conclusion. With the big 2, like a lot of the times you don't really get that conclusion. You got a lot of filler content in between
that
things
perpetual
actually happening.
And
like with 5 issues, you got 5 issues to tell your story, so it's just boom, 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 boom,
I personally like that. I all of my work up to this point they've all been miniseries, and this kind of speaks to why I like comics so much. Is I get restless easily. I'm in love with the story when I'm writing the story, but by the time that I'm done writing the story, I'm like, oh, thank God. Like I hit the finish line. And then I usually immediately will write something that's like diametrically opposed to what I just wrote. It's and that's what I love about comics is if I was writing for film or television, and I live in Los Angeles, and I can tell you for a town built on storytelling, it's really the most shallow kind of surface level reads. They want to put you in a box very, very quickly. You're the procedural guy, or you're the rom-com guy, or you're the the sci-fi guy, with very little room for nuance or interpretation.
Wow.
Comics, I got my start writing a crime noir book based on the Sunday Funnies, and then I wrote Die Hard at a Wedding, and then I wrote the war-torn Land of Oz, and then I wrote Scouts Honor. Like, it's very, it's very different. There's all sorts of different angles that comics let me take. And so I find every time that I write a series, I've got kind of a bucket list. And I get to check certain things off when I write the series. But more often than not, the list is actually much longer. I say, oh, my first book was kind of a small cast. I guess my next book, I need to have 15 speaking roles in one location. And that, I think that's a nice kind of conflict that builds more and more stories. So I won't look a gift horse in the mouth, but if somebody wants to give me the keys to an ongoing, I'm happy to do it. But for now, I kind of like, saying what I got to say and then getting out. Because I never want to overstay my welcome for a book.
All right, so back to okay. Jose, you can talk. You've been quiet this whole time. You can talk.
So. I didn't want to interrupt. I'm sorry. I try not to interrupt people.
I just have a fun question. As we're going to be winding things down here, and I
was going to say, you go, Erin. Sorry.
So you like comic books. What is your personal, what do you read? What are your influence? What do you read? What do you like to dive into, as purely a reader?
Sure. Well, there's the stuff I grew up with. I'm a 3rd generation comics fan. My mother was a comics reader. My grandfather was a comics reader. I grew up with Marvel and DC. I interned at DC. I love superheroes. The book that made me realize that real writers and artists made these things was Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. It was Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. I was way too young to read it, but it kind of like blew my mind. Like I realized like, oh, there's like a strong voice here, both in terms of the narrative and the art. And I was like, oh, there's a point of view that goes into these things.
Yes.
There are a lot of influences I have. Devin Grayson, her run on Batman Gotham Knights. There's only one trade collection that I'm aware of called Transference. But it's like the Rosetta Stone to like everything I've written, like kind of sad, isolated, lonely Batman, but I just do that with all of my characters. And I'm like, oh, that makes me want to cry for Batman. How do I make people want to cry for this character?
Yes.
The Brendan Fletcher run on Batgirl is also another kind of big influence on me. I loved how self-contained it was, how each story kind of is unique, but built to sort of a bigger kind of mega arc. I really like that.
Didn't I just read that?
Yeah, you did. But still one sent you.
Didn't I just read that a couple weeks ago?
There's Afterlife with Archie is really that I think was kind of the thing that pushed me over the ledge from being, at the time I was a reviewer over at Newsarama, and that kind of made me the gears start to turn and say, maybe I should try writing something, like the idea of taking pop culture and doing something subversive with it. Because that's I think a big through line through all of my work at this point.
That's so cool. That's so inspiring.
The stuff I'm reading now, I mean, I'm really liking, the thing I want to tell anybody watching this is, like, if I can get a career writing comics, like, I promise it's not the thing I hate most in any sort of creative field is when people say you got it or you don't. I think that's like just the biggest amount of BS. It is a craft. Creating comics is a craft, just like building a chair is a craft. And so for me, it was just kind of learning how to like demystify the process and figure out, like, all right, what makes a chair a chair? It's got the seat. It's got at least one leg. Maybe it's got a back to it, but you get to decide, like, what's it made out of? What's the color? What's the how many legs does it have? Is it a sofa? Is it a love seat? Is it a rocking chair? Like, that's the kind of personal spin you get to add to your chair. You just get to figure out, like, structurally what it makes a chair a chair. I feel like I had a point with this and I don't remember what it was.
That's how it goes on these, right? Sometimes you just start talking and you don't know what you're saying.
I get on my soapbox of anybody can be a comics creator. There should be no gatekeeping for that. It's just making a comic.
You see, I have a background in film. I have a bachelor's degree. I went to school for film, and like I've only recently started thinking about like comics in the form of like something that I can write. You know what I mean? Like a script is a script, right? Like
exactly.
You can translate it. So like
exactly.
I don't know. I've been having a blast with it. An absolute blast.
Writing comics, it's a medium that is defined by its limitations in a lot of ways, because you only have 20 or 22 pages, and that you can only fit a certain amount per page. And so you're kind of figuring out, all right, how do I distill this story to get all the story that I need to cover all the ground I have to, but also kind of modulating the rhythm in a way that, like, this is fun and interesting and like kind of moves you, just in terms of the sheer kind of frequency of visuals. And that's kind of fun. I look at it as like a Rubik's Cube in a lot of ways. I'm like, there is a solution to any idea that I've got, but sometimes it takes 5 moves. Sometimes it takes 100 moves to kind of figure out how to make that happen. That's what I'm telling myself right now while I'm working in an outline that's like totally kicking my butt.
So as somebody that wants to be a writer, like, I'm gonna ask you, like, sure. I have a list, like an ever-growing list. Like, I just write down every idea that comes to my mind, like every single like idea that comes to my mind. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I'll pull my phone out and just kind of like jot it down real quick, and you know, that'll be that. But like later on, when I want to write something, I have that to go back to. And,
Yeah.
I think that's. I just wanted to ask you if that's normal. I haven't talked to many
that
writers.
That is 100% normal. What I tend to do is, first off, my poor friends, like I bombard them with ideas 24/7. Most of the time they're like not good, or like I'm just reinventing like a movie that I like. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, so this is an idea, and my friend is like, you just invented the Matrix, and I'm like, you're right. I just reinvented the Matrix. But for me, what I tend to do is I come up with the ideas. I usually run it by my partner, because she's not a comics fan, but she's like a voracious reader, and so she's kind of like the human tether to all of this stuff. Where I'm like, does this like make sense to you? And if she's sometimes like she's kind of like, I don't get it, and I'm like, all right, that's throw it in the trash. But if she like kind of vibes with it, I'm like, all right, like a human being could read this and like understand this, not a comics fan. But what I tend to do then is I shelve those ideas. I usually wait at least a month, because my thinking is, if I remember this in a month, then maybe it's got legs. Whereas like if I don't remember it in a month, then like clearly it wasn't worth it. It clearly can't, if I can't remember it, I can't expect you to remember it. And so that tends to be, but no, I mean, comics are sort of like, it feeds like the ADD streak in me, where I'm just like, oh yeah, I can write whatever I feel like. And, as long as I kind of find the right artist, and like, we can sort of figure out like the page rate that everybody can live with, it can get done. It's not like I have to like, rent like a visual effects like department to make this thing happen.
Yeah. It's like you can bring your idea to life fairly easily. I mean,
yeah, it can, comparatively speaking, it's a very sort of garage band mentality. And I think even for a book like Scout's Honor, where we're working with professional editors and we're working with a publisher that's bankrolling the project, which is a first for me. I still think there's a little bit of that garage band mentality where we're all sort of jamming out, and we're riffing off of one another, and we're sort of saying, oh, Luca's art's coming in. All right, like this is going to be an angle that I'm going to try to take in this next script to try to lean into his style. And, seeing Matt Milla and Carlos Manguel, our colorist and letterer on the book, it really just, I think it inspires us to all of us to bring our A game, and sometimes, kind of roll with the punches a little bit.
I love it. Especially as somebody that wants to like work in comics. Like it's really inspiring. And that whole, like you said, the whole garage band vibe of things, like just a couple guys like coming together and making a book, that's really cool to me. Cause like when I look at comic book artists, like I don't really go for like superstars. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Like there's, you have your big names out there in the comic book world that have like 300,000-400,000 followers on Twitter that, they're selling everything. They're getting movie options and stuff. I don't really go for that. I mean, I'm not that those guys aren't inspiring to me, because they are. I just think that, when you have, like you said, the garage band mentality, like the work that like the final product is like, you can tell like how much love was put into it, rather than like corporate love. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
well, I think for me, the thing that I always say, and it's funny because there is certainly that mentality of like, oh, can I turn this thing into another thing? And look, getting optioned is great. I've done that a few times, but for me, I grew up loving comics. This is my astronaut job. This is my NBA job. And so thinking like, oh, can I turn this into a movie, or can I turn this into a TV show? Like, that's not really how I go about it. For me, I have people ask me a lot, like, how do you get optioned? How do you do whatever? And it's kind of, you got to be zen about it. Make the best.
Don't want to get optioned. I mean,
you got to make the best comic you can, and then success begets success.
Like focus on,
Yeah, I bristle. I always bristle when I see people who kind of see comics as like a stepping stone, where they're like, oh, this is really kind of my pitch deck to make a TV show. And there are a handful of names that I've seen doing this that I don't love, but I think ultimately I want to make my comic the best like example of a comic that I can, but then to also kind of make it accessible, that I could give this to my girlfriend or my girlfriend's mom, or somebody who's not a diehard comics fan. I think a question we should all be asking ourselves, and just existentially, is how do we invite more people to the table? How do we build a bigger table?
Yes.
How do we I think there's a real readership diaspora out there. I don't think people talk all the time saying, oh, comics fans are dying. I think that's nonsense. I think they're just they're fractured. They're scattered all over the place. There's the Wednesday Warriors. There's the people who buy on Kickstarter. There's the YA fans. There's the people who buy at conventions. There's the people who buy on Amazon or Comixology or Barnes & Noble. And I think it's incumbent upon every creator to try to figure out how to kind of bring these groups together. And some of that is telling books on different platforms, but I think it's also experimenting with your content and experimenting with the themes and the concepts that you're working with. And don't get me wrong, there's certainly a market for esoteric books. I'm not the guy to write those. I'm the guy who's just like, how do I tell a concept that I can describe in a sentence or two that you will understand? Saying that there's a post-apocalyptic cult and their Bible's an old Boy Scout manual.
Yeah, that's man,
that Scout's honor to a T.
Listen,
but I want more people to read. And
it feels like a crazy vault experiment.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like. And I don't want to keep comparing your work to like somebody else's work.
Hey, I'll take
yours is so unique, and it's standalone. Like it's good on its own, but like I see the influences, and that just makes me happy because it's wow, this guy likes the things I like, and he's using that to make a book. Like as a creator, like that's inspiring to me. So like.
Thank you.
And it's really cool to see books that, other media that's influenced by,
sure.
Things that, I like. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought.
Well, it's kind of Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, kind of piggyback on Erin's thoughts, is that for the BBL comics, is sometimes it's a great medium because it's both a written and visual.
Sure.
It uses both sides of the brain.
You use everything, and you can actually get more out than, say, a regular book or a movie.
Sure.
You can actually explore the world more. You can explore the concepts more. You can even, if you wanted to do a filler issue, you can do a filler issue and explore a concept that you touched upon before. And that is the beauty of the comic book art form that I appreciate.
I just love the art. I mean, I make no bones that I'm kind of the weak link, in the team, because ultimately, I write a script. I have scripts that are waiting for art right now. I can tell you, it means nothing. It's just once you kind of see that script being sort of remixed and reimagined through an artist's lens, that's when the magic shows up. That's when it becomes like interesting. And so, I always say, I'm a lazy writer. And so when art comes in, that like reinvigorates me. That makes me want to get out of bed and actually keep working. When you're writing like a whole series with no art coming in, you better like love that thing to death. But, you've written an issue and art starts coming in and you're like, yeah, like as somebody who's done it both ways, I can tell you, writing as art comes in, it's so much more fun and it's so much more exciting. And it just really like, yeah, you feel like you've pulled off the greatest scam in history because you're just like, oh, like people are going to say that like, this thing is so smart. And I'm like, well, the art looks beautiful.
Awesome.
So
I can see your excitement with it. It's there. So as we're gonna be closing up here in like 5-10 minutes. We're gonna be closing the stream down, ending. I don't know. I'm all over my words today. So I want to ask you, what are your favorite? Do you read any current indie books? Like, what are your favorite current? What are your current books? Like, what are you reading? What's your favorite?
So I actually, I make it a point that I want to make sure that I'm always reading and figuring out what's going on, because I was a comics journalist for a long time, and so I like to know, like, just keep abreast of what's going on. Let me see what I wrote in my newsletter this week actually. because there's a lot of things that I'm really digging. Not to be too much of a team player here, but I really like Maniac of New York and Shadow Doctor over at Aftershock. Those are really
Maniac
fun
in New
books.
York is I'm really looking forward to that one.
That's a good
Aftershock
one.
just keeps putting out
they're putting out some really fun stuff right now. And the first issue of Shadow Doctor really kind of knocked me on my ass. I was just, I didn't know what I was getting into. And honestly, I would recommend you don't read any spoilers for it. Just read the first issue. It's, I think, really, really wonderful writing. My buddy Rich Duke has a book out called Sea of Sorrows. And I honestly think it's even better than his Bram Stoker nominated book, Road of Bones. It's sort of about a sea salvage operation that comes across some murderous sirens. It's really cool. The next issue is coming out in a couple of weeks. Rich gave me a copy. It's, I think, the best thing he's ever written. I'm really liking a lot of stuff that Paul Aller is doing. Hollow Heart over at Vault is great. His G.I. Joe run, I think, was criminally slept on. They just wrapped that up a couple weeks ago. The Autumnal, my buddy Chris Sheehan is on that.
That's a good one. I like that one.
Chris is just an artistic force. I'm lucky enough I got to work on a short anthology story that I think will be announced hopefully soon. We worked on it during the pandemic, and he's just a dream to work with. James Tynan's Department of Truth is fantastic. Anything by Hickman or Ewing, over at Marvel. I feel like anything in the X-Men book, Sword, Immortal Hulk. Those are the two writers I want to be when I grow up. We'll see if I'm ever that smart. But
man, Hickman, I lost Dawn of X and House of X came out. What was that? 2019, and 2019, after that, like an issue or two of X-Men, and then like all the other issues, I just kind of gave up. I was just it's so lot. Much.
There's so much going on, and it's one of those things. It scratches my 90s kid lizard brain, where I grew up reading like Fatal Attractions and all the other X-Men 90s crossovers. And so for me, I'm like such a mark for anything Spider-Man and the X-Men, because yes, when I was 12 years old, that's what I was reading. And so I always say X-Men got me through the pandemic, because those were that, and Al Ewing was a lot of what I was reading during that time. Tom Taylor's got some really fun stuff. I'm excited to read his
Tom Taylor. No, he's one of my favorites. He's
okay. He's a favorite around. He's a favorite around here.
He's one of those writers that just jerk at my little heartstrings, my feelings.
Tom, first off, is I think he's a wonderful writer. I think a lot of people's introduction to him was his Injustice book, and I could see a lot of people kind of turning up their nose at it for thinking, well, the video game is super grim dark, this book must be super grim dark, and no, it was very subversive. That Tom was
the most
adding in this hopeful streak to this really super grim video game, and seeing his work on X-Men Red, All New Wolverine. I'm really excited to read his Nightwing. Tom, actually, I want to give him a special thanks, because he gave a pull quote for Scout's Honor that I believe will be on the trade. But I knew that as this book came out, I was like, there's only one person that I want to do this book, to do a pull quote for this book. And I'm like, it's the guy who wrote All New Wolverine and Deceased. And so, I big fan of Tom's work. I think he's somehow still underrated, and I think he's one of the best and brightest that the big two has to offer. And I feel like if DC, I love DC, but if DC was really smart on it, they would be giving him the keys to the kingdom, and they would be locking him down as an exclusive, because I think he should be a flagship writer, and he's just this close from being it. And
that Suicide Squad,
I agree. Yeah,
that was fun.
That was amazing. I agree with you,
I
loved it.
I agree with you, because he's one of those writers where if you give him a character that's been around for decades, his first time writing it, either the character could have been around for decades or it's just born yesterday. It's he created the character. It's he knows the characters backwards, forwards, inside and out.
He's crazy
very few
too, you know. He's crazy. I've seen him swallowing swords.
Yeah, he's a former circus performer. I don't know if
you guys know that. He's pretty nuts.
My younger brother is a former circus performer, and so I always felt a little bit of kinship with Tom in that regard, where like he's like balancing chairs on his chin, and it just makes me think
and writing Batman at the same time.
Yeah, it just makes me think of my kid brother who just like when he wants to impress a girl, he just starts doing handstands in her apartment, and I'm just like, you know, Tom he's a real nice guy. I've met him at a few shows, and he is just as sweet in person as he is on Twitter. Yeah, really, really genuinely good dude, and a guy who I'm always excited to see is getting more work.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The camaraderie is amazing among some comic book readers.
It's an interesting industry because I feel like the way that it's structured, there's always that feeling of scarcity, and so there's that lizard brain feeling of competition. And I'm not immune to it. I've certainly seen announcements where I know instinctively like I would be bad at that book, or that's not a good book. That wouldn't be a good fit for me. But you think like, oh, that person got something. Like, why didn't I get a gig? And the thing is like, you just have to keep reminding yourself, and sometimes you just have to repeat it even if you don't believe it, is like you're only running your own race. Your opportunities, as long as you keep taking swings, your opportunities will come. It will happen. And sometimes it's not traditional. I mean, I ran a Kickstarter during the pandemic specifically because all the acquisitions pipelines were shut down. Sometimes you make your own opportunities, but I feel like the comics industry, when you let your guard down and you just kind of reach out and you're supportive of other people and their successes, you find that like, oh, there can be a real village built of people who are willing to support your work as well. Awesome. And I felt so fortunate, that so many creators and retailers and press and fans have all kind of come together to support my work because, it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. And so
I know my circle on Twitter, like I'm friends with a lot of people, and everybody's hyping your book up. I mean, everybody's hyping your book up. Like your book is like that one of the talks around like the comics. Cool. Like and when an indie book blows up like that, like I'm reading quite a few indie books, and like not every indie book blows up like that. Not everybody loves like the book, you know what I mean? You're right up there with Philadelphia and Something's Killing the Children. Like you're right up there with them.
Those are big names to be lumped in with. So I appreciate it. I think that's very generous of you. And I want to thank you guys because like, honestly, I feel like any creator who doesn't, I know there are some creators at like Marvel and DC who can't do a lot of press because like they would get yelled at if they spoiled stuff. But I feel like any other creator, there are some that are shy, and that's, I feel like, to their detriment, to their team's detriment. But there are some who, for whatever reason, kind of turn up their nose at talking with people about their books. And I don't get it. I feel like you're doing me a favor, by shouting out my work. Maybe it comes from my career trajectory that I tried every stable job, and then I kind of landed into this, and it was the first job that I felt like I could be good at.
That's awesome.
I'm grateful for every single person who buys the book, as long as they're not like a bigot, like as long as they're not like an asshole. I'm thrilled that anyone would pick up a book with my name on it, whether it's
I have it at the shop now. They weren't ordering it, my LCS. They weren't ordering your book, and I got them to do it. They have it on the shelf now.
Thank you. And that's the thing. It takes fans like you to get a book that traction. There's so much stuff out in the market right now, and I know that there are writers who are way more talented than me, but I want everybody to know, whoever's reading my book, like, I see you out there, and I'm grateful for it. And I just want to make sure that everybody feels acknowledged and knows that, like, it's because of stuff like this. It's because of conversations like this that I get to do more work. So thank you for that. And thank you for your supporting me. And I hope you'll stick around for the rest of Scout's Honor. I hope you'll go back and read my other books. I hope you'll stick around for the future for some other fun stuff coming down the pike.
You don't have a release date for the trade yet, do you?
I believe it's either going to be. I think it's going to be sometime in August, based on the way.
I don't usually pick up trades if I have all the singles, but if I really love a book, I will pick up the trade. And I've been picking up a lot of Aftershock trades.
Thank you.
A lot of Aftershock stuff going on. But anyway, we're gonna be shutting down here soon. So is there anything else you want to say? I'm gonna throw your Twitter link up here so people can find your work. And
you can Scouts Honor number 3 comes out this Wednesday, March 10th. You can pre-order issues 4 and 5 with the codes FEB 210990 and MAR 211013. You can follow me on Twitter at Pepose D. It's got that's my pinned tweet, so you can get all that pre-order information there. You can follow me on Instagram at Pepose D or David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews, or visit my website, davidpepose.com.
Pep Talks. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. So yeah, you're gonna be one of those writers that I pick up everything.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
I really want to follow your career and see where it takes you. Maybe I'll have you back on here again when when we have
anytime
more. You're our first, so we need to get a bit of practice. You're the.
Yeah. You did fantastic. Your first try, you nailed it.
Thank you so much. Is there anything you wanted to say, Jose, before we wrap it up here?
One question might be the most important question throughout the entire night.
Ooh,
okay. What is your favorite breakfast food?
Oh, we forgot that. We didn't ask Nat last week either. But anyway, what's your favorite breakfast food?
I mean, does it have to be strictly breakfast food? Or is it my favorite thing that I would eat in the breakfast period?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I mean, look, my favorite thing that I'd eat for breakfast, I mean, that would have to be St. Louis style pizza and St. Louis style toasted ravioli, but that's probably not like the thing you're asking me. So I would say the thing that I like most as a breakfast item is a fried egg sandwich with some avocado, cheese, and some chipotle mayo. That's my jam.
That's really
like
good.
The classiest we've had on here. People usually just like, I like toast and eggs. It's like, all right.
I like diner food, but like weirdly specific diner food.
Well, when we started this show, I know we're only on issue or episode. Well, I say issue 3 because comics. But we did 10 episodes on Twitch. So during the time when we first started doing these episodes, I was on I ate a lot. Like every day, I was eating breakfast food. That's all I was eating. So that's how that came to be.
That's funny. Yeah. But no, I miss my St. Louis style pizza. And once the pandemic's over, you better believe I'm flying home and and going to town on some of that.
Awesome. Well,
awesome.
I guess that's it. I don't really have anything else for you. I think you nailed everything. Like we didn't ask everything, but you kind of. You kind of answered a lot of things on your own.
Like we had a set of questions you just inadvertently answered without us asking.
It was really good. It was really good. Yes, it was really good. So if that's it, then that's it.
Well, thank you both for having me again, and for being so supportive of Scouts Honor, and anyone watching. Thank you guys as well. It's like I said, it's a privilege and it's a dream to be here. So thanks so much for your support.
All right. Well, I hope you two have a great weekend. Stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands. And that's it. Have a good one.
Thanks. Have a good night.